crash, bang, wallop. What an Armored Core. After the overwhelming success of Elden Ring last year, it might have been a surprise for many to see FromSoftware return to Armored Core, a series that largely defined the company before the success of Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. A strict mission structure, more straightforward narrative, and projectile-based combat make the Armored Core series seem almost different to everything that FromSoft has become and known for. According to the developers though, it was always a case of when, not if, in returning to the mech-based series, and Armored Core 6 certainly does feel like the perfect way to achieve such a restoration after a decade of silence. The game is undoubtedly still not a Souls-like experience, but takes much of what FromSoft has applied to its games in recent years and molds it with the core of the mech series to create something really special. Falling in line with much of the freedom that Armored Core 6 provides to the player is a narrative that is all about independence. You play as a lone mercenary 621 who usurps the moniker of Raven from the data of a fallen Armored Core in the game's opening sequences. Upon gaining this new identity, you become acquainted with a number of Rubicon's factions: Balam, Arquebus Corporation, the Rubicon Liberation Front, and even some arms dealers. Everyone is on the hunt for Coral, a mysterious and powerful substance that emerged after the fires of Ibis ravaged the plains of Rubicon, and you play a key part in helping them secure it. Your role is very much that of a mercenary, as you pick up any and all jobs to begin with, without any recourse of the effects your actions might cause. New information reveals itself, and you start to gain a greater sense of what Rubicon once was, what you're fighting for, and whether you're taking the right actions in the first place. From the offset, it is clear that Armored Core 6 is going to be a tough game. While it isn't exactly surprising when it comes to FromSoft's identity and philosophy, it feels like a different kind of difficulty that many fans of the Souls series might not actually be used to. Although games like Elden Ring and to some extent Bloodborne are extremely difficult in their own right, there is almost a language that you can innately recognise when it comes to their difficulty if you've played a Souls-like game before. Patience, movesets and rhythm, a methodology of playing that, while it does get more intense over time, stays within the same wavelength. This is perhaps why many Souls fans found a game like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice so immediately challenging, as it alienates much of what we understand from the cadence of Souls-like combat, and this very much extends to Armored Core 6 as well. Verticality enters the fold. You're expected to astutely manage 4 weapons at once, and your enemies move faster than most things you've ever seen in a FromSoft game before. This is clear from the first mission, with a troublesome boss that forces you to pick things up very quickly. At the time, it felt insurmountable, with a barrage of missiles flying my way while I was just trying to stay in the air. But in retrospect, it was merely just the beginning of the game's unyielding challenge. I can't count the number of times that I generally believed that I was hard stuck when playing, where a boss seemed too quick or too powerful for me to even possibly overcome, yet I always did, and that feeling of pure elation was ever present as my heart pounded enough to burst out of my chest. What feels like a consistent effort to overcome the frustration associated with repeatedly attempting a tough boss is ever present within Armored Core 6, arriving in the form of keen adaptability and mostly stress-free checkpoints. Unlike many other Souls-like games, it is nearly impossible to go through the entirety of Armored Core 6 with one single build, or even a solitary build type. Not only are certain bosses and areas much easier when approached in a certain way, but the game gives you unlimited opportunities to change things up with little or no cost at all. You gain new parts for your mech by completing missions and purchasing them from the parts store, but of course they don't come for free. All the best parts in the game can set your comb reserves back a fair amount, which might lead some to be wary of purchasing. But the key to this is the sense of experimentation, and the fact that every item sells for the exact amount that you purchased it for. Want to try out a tank build when you've been nothing but nimble so far? Sell all of your parts and try it out. The worst case scenario is that you don't like it, and then you can just go back to where you started with literally no extra cost at all. What further helps this is the ability to save your mech configurations as presets that you can freely return to with the press of a few buttons. This makes trying things out and having a different build even easier and much more of an incentive. This is all integrated into the boss fights through an incredibly forgiving checkpoint system that incentivizes replayability in the classic bash your head against the wall Souls format. There is a handy checkpoint at the start of every single boss fight encounter in the game that allows you to limitlessly retry through fights, refilling your health, ammo and other consumables with each restart too. In addition to this, you can reassemble your mech with all of your available parts within this retry screen as well, which makes trying new things so easy and further encourages experimentation. Perhaps my only frustration with this is the fact that these checkpoints are lost if you quit the game or want to return to the shop to buy new items, meaning that you'll have to do the entire level again to reach the boss. While admittedly the boss levels aren't as long as their non-boss equivalent, it's still rather frustrating to have to repeat the process, especially when many bosses were so tough that I felt like I often needed to rest or take a break from the game entirely. In terms of the combat itself, Armored Core 6 produces many of FromSoftware's fastest and most exhilarating battles yet, requiring you to be innately dialed into the flow of each fight in order to overcome the challenge that it presents. As mentioned, it did take me a while to get into the flow of Armored Core and become one with my mech, as the prospect of managing all 4 weapons while navigating the air was understandably quite tricky. Once you get the hang of it though, Armored Core 6's flow feels incredibly satisfying and almost reminiscent of the aggressiveness needed to conquer Bloodborne. The left arm plasma sword became a very quick favourite of mine, as it dealt high damage and was excellent for closing down fast moving foes. Pairing this with one of the shotguns and the reverse jointed legs, which produced a much higher initial jump, meant that I could pounce on my foes and deal quick damage up close and personal. To achieve this though, I needed to sacrifice a lot of weight and subsequently a lot of HP too, meaning that I was near enough a glass cannon. This didn't bode well for certain bosses whose incoming fire I struggled to avoid. So in that instance, I would switch to a quite literally tankier build that gave me a much higher health pool at the cost of my agility points. This is just a snapshot of the many decisions that you'll have to make when approaching the combat in Armored Core 6, and one of the reasons why it works so well for me. There's just about something for everyone here, without any of the regrets that sometimes come with picking the wrong class or specialisation at the start of a Souls game. The world and its variants was perhaps the aspect of Armored Core 6 that I was most worried about before playing. Coming off of the back of a game like Elden Ring especially, you can't help but have high expectations for richly detailed environments. And while it is understandable that Armored Core 6 won't possess the sheer scale due to its mission structure, I couldn't help but hold my own reservations about the spaces that would be occupied. Old factories and cities laid to waste are intriguing at first but can get rather repetitive, especially from a colour palette perspective. Thankfully this is not the case at all in Armored Core 6, and there is an abundance of visually captivating spaces that form the Rubicon of both the past and the present. You'll venture through sparse deserts, snow-filled excavation sites, and hanging cities, torn apart by the flames of Ibis, as they provide not only a stimulating background from an aesthetic point of view, but also a wonderfully crafted playground that lets the game's movement shine. Vast amounts of space are afforded when needed, letting some of the game's grand set pieces of set design shine on an immense scale. On the flip side, claustrophobic crawls through the caverns of an unexplored mine feel adequately intense as you attempt to dodge through a space that is far too small for the armoured mechs that currently inhabit it. All in all, Armored Core 6 is an exceptional return to the series after such a long hiatus, keeping the core of the game true to its mechanical origins while integrating much of what has thrust FromSoftware into such an overwhelming critical acclaim. While it perhaps does not reach the colossal heights of some of FromSoftware's most defining games, it still features an exceptionally deep combat system, an abundance of challenging and memorable bosses, and a world that surprised me with its visual detail and diversity. We reviewed this on the PlayStation 5, with the code being provided by the publisher. We'd like to thank FromSoftware for providing the code for us. If you've enjoyed this review, don't forget to give the video a like, and drop us a follow if you fancy as well. I've been Ollie, and I'll catch you next time.